Since the summer of 2020, when I started this podcast, I've really enjoyed the process of building the brand of Wi-Fi Water. The journey has been very creatively rewarding and even helped me to carve out a community of guests who've joined me for an episode. So I'm going to assume that you're wondering, is this really the last Wi-Fi Water episode? The simple answer is yes, and the more complex answer is no. On this episode, I'm going to share with you the future of Wi-Fi Water. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi Water's final episode. I started Wi-Fi Water back on July 13th of 2020, and the first episode was entitled, Let's Do This. The podcast has had many guests and covered a variety of topics since. On episode 50, I decided to take Wi-Fi Water towards two topics exclusively, crypto and the climate crisis, and explore and highlight the people and communities that are engaged in these two topics. Two topics that I feel will continue to shape how so much of our society evolves over the next 10 to 20 years. However, over the last 3 months, three things have changed my thinking and influenced the new direction of this podcast. Number one, I'm becoming more and more aware that A, talking about the climate is important, and B, it's extremely draining to create content around the climate crisis. This is because it's depressing to engage and research data points that more often than not leave me with way more questions than answers, and both a feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, which are two things that are not great for inspiration and creativity, which are necessary to create weekly podcast episodes. The idea of climate grief, which Vanessa mentions in episode 65, is very real, and upon reflecting on all the episodes I've created since passing episode 50, it's just been difficult for me to focus in on and create climate-related content. As an example, I was recently reading through a PDF put out by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and had to take a 30-minute break just due to the existential crisis that sea level rise will be for millions, if not billions, over the next 3 decades. The climate crisis is draining to create content around, and if podcasting is going to continue to be an enjoyable endeavor, I'd really like to focus on an area that brings me hope, intrigue, wonder, and an ever-growing global community and doesn't leave me feeling down. It may be selfish, but at the end of the day, this is my podcast. Number two, I've decided recently that blockchain is where I'd like to dedicate my time both professionally and personally. And so why not focus in on one topic and see where it leads? And please know that when I say blockchain, I'm referring to cryptocurrency, NFTs, DeFi, DAOs, Dapps, Web3, the metaverse, which, while not necessarily built on blockchain, will interact and have interoperability with many Web3 and blockchain-based products. Number three can best be understood as the butterfly effect, to which I'll attribute to Jay Harris. Jay runs a podcast on technology and has done so with a co-host for about 8 months. Jay's podcast recently rebranded to add in more technical terms to its name, and since he's seen a meteoric rise in organic traffic on podcasting platforms. In sum, Jay shared a post about hitting 50,000 downloads, and I was immediately struck with two things. One, good on Jay, he deserves it. And two, what did he change in his recipe to get more people to listen? Upon asking him, he simply said, since I changed the name, downloads have exploded. And it was with that I decided to focus in on blockchain, pivot away from the climate crisis, and rebrand Wi-Fi Water into the More Than Blockchain podcast, which will continue to have guests on from all over the world that are tied into blockchain. More Than Blockchain, as its name states, will discuss blockchain and beyond, and be a platform where I'll explore, both with guests and via QuickPods, where blockchain is today and where it's going to take us tomorrow. It's bittersweet to leave behind the brand of Wi-Fi Water, mostly because I just love it. The two words resonate, but also exciting to take my podcasting to a new destination. Over the next week, I'll be actively unpublishing non-blockchain related episodes on what's currently Wi-Fi Water. And so many of the 65 Wi-Fi Water episodes will no longer show up on podcast platforms, but will all still be available on YouTube. And if you're a guest from an earlier episode, please know that I wouldn't be here without you, and that I'll always keep copies of any earlier episodes should you want them. So feel free to message me if you'd like original audio. Having to delete Wi-Fi Water episodes isn't cool, and the transition and rebranding process of the podcast is iteration driven and an uncomfortable one, to be honest. I've gone ahead and created all new social media accounts for the new brand, so it has its own lane to drive, and also to leave behind digital remains of Wi-Fi and water. I'm sure that in the future, I'll go through and delete many of the accounts, but I plan on always leaving all 65 Wi-Fi and water episodes up on YouTube. This move away from creating content on the climate crisis is tough, because clearly we need to address the climate crisis. And so I'll continue to live a life that focuses my own actions to make daily and lifestyle earth-friendly decisions. And I hope y'all as listeners consider doing the same. Having a digital world means nothing if we destroy the physical world. To close out this episode, which for some may be the last episode you'll hear of Wi-Fi and water, and for others, maybe the first episode you'll hear for More Than Blockchain, I want to thank you for listening and being a witness to this whole rebranding process. I had originally planned on publishing an episode today exploring the metaverse and how it will transform our world. But it seems like the universe had a different plan, and that has led me to the creation of the More Than Blockchain podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode, and be sure to follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. I'll be overhauling and curating the podcast episodes to reflect the new blockchain-focused direction. So don't be alarmed if next time you're on Apple or Spotify, episodes are missing. I'll also add on intros and outros to the blockchain-related episodes from Wi-Fi and Water that will transition into More Than Blockchain. Thanks again for listening to this episode. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this episode has been both Wi-Fi and Water and More Than Blockchain.